This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au. Keep moving with Australia's #1 address in property.
Welcome back. There were about 1,300 auctions held across the country this weekend, returning a clearance rate of about 59%. New South Wales held about 600 auctions with a clearance rate of 54.4%. There were also about 1,540 private sales. Victoria held 342 auctions with a much higher clearance rate of 69.3%. There were also about 1,350 private sales. Queensland held 79 auctions with a clearance rate of 57%. There were also about 1,000 private sales. South Australia held 68 auctions with a clearance rate of about 62%. There were also about 260 private sales. Canberra held 56 auctions with a clearance rate of about 75%. There were also about 81 private sales. WA held 4 with 1 home being sold. There were a further 551 private sales. And the NT held 2 with both properties passing in, but there were 28 private sales. The Reserve Bank has cut interest rates twice this year, and money markets expect a few more cuts still to come in 2025. Now, falling rates reduces the cost of borrowing money, which should, in theory, help Australia's struggling construction sector finance more projects. Ross Greenwood caught up with Angus from REA Group a little earlier.
Two of the key costs for home builders are obviously the cost of building the home, but also the cost of financing. And so as we're starting to see rates fall, that's going to start to make a lot more projects a bit more feasible. In addition, the fact that we're starting to see home prices grow, a bit more broad-based, we're starting to see it in Melbourne, starting to see it in Sydney, more than we were last year. That's also going to start to make more projects feasible and encourage home builders to start those projects and get them moving into the pipeline. Now, unfortunately to date we haven't seen that, but hopefully as rates start to come through, that's what we'll start to see.
OK, then tell me the shape of our cities into the future. Where are these homes most likely to be built? Are they right smack bang in the middle of our city, the so-called urban infill, or is it going to be the greenfield stuff on the edge of our big cities? Because that's where most of the population does go to.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's the billion or trillion dollar question is, how do we shape our cities? The sort of short, maybe slightly easy answer is, look, a lot of it at the moment, and will probably continue to be, will be happening in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. It's been a very fast growing area. An enormous share of the new detached houses that get built across Australia are built out in Melbourne's west and northwest. That's likely going to continue to be the case just because of geography. When we're looking, kind of at our inner cities, places like Melbourne, inner city Melbourne, inner city Sydney, obviously those infill areas are going to be critical, and particularly critical for housing affordability in those areas. We know that the only way to sustainably improve housing affordability in our most expensive cities like Sydney is to build homes where people want to live. There are, programs in place by state governments, notably the Transit Orient Development here in Sydney, to build homes around major transit hubs. Those are obviously quite new. We're yet to see big impacts from that, but those are the sorts of projects and changes that will start to improve affordability.
Because that also goes to infrastructure, because if you build on the outskirts of cities or towns, to be fair, because a lot of regional Australia has got the same thing, you've got to build new roads, new guttering, new water facilities, new electricity facilities, telecommunications. There's a whole lot that comes with building a brand new block as compared with the infill where there's already infrastructure there, which may need to be upgraded, but often is much cheaper to achieve.
Yeah, exactly right, Ross. The cost of building a house or the cost of building a suburb is not just the cost of building the house, it's all the supporting infrastructure that goes into it. And higher density housing can be more affordable to provide because it is less demanding on road infrastructure and on things like water and sewer. What we're trying to do here in Sydney and Melbourne is take advantage of the infrastructure that we have, of the projects in place, things like, the metro here in Sydney, to upzone around those rapid mass transit areas, to really take advantage of that infrastructure spending that's already taking place and put housing in well-located areas that, will help improve affordability around those major transit pockets.
And just a quick one, you would have done some research over the years. Is there any evidence that where you build those infrastructure hubs or those transport hubs that property prices, home prices commensurately start to rise? Is that starting to happen in places like Brisbane or Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, which have had big infrastructure upgrades?
Yeah, obviously infrastructure or surrounding infrastructure does make those parcels more attractive, particularly if they get upzoned and can therefore support more dwellings, more valuable land. The kind of flip side and balance to this, though, is those upzonings do help make housing itself more affordable. So while it might make that land more attractive, more expensive, the actual housing that it can support can become more affordable. And the evidence we have here comes from a number of places, but just across the ditch in New Zealand, Auckland did a big upzoning allowing medium density across much of Auckland. And what we saw was that home prices there rose by less than they did elsewhere in New Zealand, and rents also rose by less. So it helped improve affordability across Auckland.
Always a good lesson, Angus Moore. Many thanks for your time as always. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Ross.